Shalom and welcome to the third and final program in the Talking Memory series, the Oneg Shabbat Archives and Beyond, documenting and preserving the history of European Jewry at the Jewish Historical Institute, marking the Jewish Historical Institute's 75th anniversary. On today's program, Beyond Oneg Shabbat, groundbreaking research and findings in the Jewish Historical Institute, we are honored to have two speakers, Dr. Ewa Wiatr, and we'll talk about Lodz Ghetto's legacy at the Jewish Historical Institute, and Peter Nazaruk, who will give a presentation on the fate of the Library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. And my name is Medin Shachar, and I work at the Ghetto Fighters House as an educator and a guide. I want to welcome our global audience with a special welcome, as always, to the survivors and their families that are with us today. And as you can see in the chat box, we have a lot of connections to Łódź. We want to thank everyone for their support and interest in our programs. And this series is in partnership with the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center in South Africa, Classrooms Without Borders in the United States, Liberation 75 in Canada, the Rabin Chair Forum at George Washington University, the Warsaw Ghetto NN Theater in Lublin, the Polish Institute in Tel Aviv, and the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. And now, every weekend, our CEO, Yigal Cohen, sends the staff of the Ghetto Fighters House a summary of the museum's activities from all the departments. This week, we got a surprising notice. While going through the Adolf Berman collection, many of you have heard this name over the past few months, our archivists found a report that was prepared by the Oneg Shabbat archivists. It was donated to the Ghetto Fighters House sometime before 1956 by Hirsch Basel, one of the members of Oneg Shabbat, and one of the only three survivors, along with his wife, Luma, from the incredible group of writers and historians. If we have learned anything from this series about Oneg Shabbat and the Jewish Historical Institute, it is a spiritual resistance and the great risk taken by Jews to document real-time what was happening to European Jewry during the Holocaust, in hopes of leaving behind the tangible evidence of the Nazi crimes and a testament to their families. So quickly, before I introduce our guests for this evening's program, I stuck in a little surprise. From the Adolf Berman collection, we have a report that was prepared by the Oneg Shabbat archive. It was around the end of 1942. It was smuggled out to the Aryan side, to the Jewish National Council. And it really gives a description, a very detailed description of the Great Deportation and Treblinka and the long 1942 degree of Jews that were passing even before the Great Deportation started. In this particular page, on the left, we can see the Polish original version that we have in our Adolf Berman collection. And on the right, the translation, as soon as it was given to the museum, like I said, just before 1956 by Hirsch Wasser. And one of the things that was done in the Oneg Shabbat was not only to give detailed descriptions, historians, journalists, everyday people, but also to give statistics. And we can see here the dates of the deportations, how many people were sent. One day, there are no people sent. It says a break on the 5th of September, and then it continues on. And on the left, we can see the same page in Polish. And I wanted to share that with you because I think that really one of the things that we see is just how important the Jewish Historical Institute is, and the Oneg Shabbat archives are to us today as they were relevant 80 years ago. So with that, I want to go back to our program and to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Ewa Wiatr is a scholar and researcher at the Center for Jewish Research at the University of Lodz since 2006. The principal field of her scholarly activity is the history of World War II, especially the Warsaw Ghetto and the Holocaust in Poland. She is currently working on her book about the Warsaw Ghetto community, focusing on everyday life, as well as the survival strategy of its inmates. During the work at the Center for Jewish Research, she was a member of the editing teams of the Lodz Ghetto Chronicle 5 volumes, and the Encyclopedia of the Lodz Ghetto. Both of these publications are known as the most important sources of information on the history of the Lodz Ghetto. Recently, she is one of the editors, together with Adam Sitarek, of David Serakoyak's diary, as well as Rivka Lipschit's diary, written in the Lodz Ghetto. Her latest project focuses on lexicon of the Lodz Ghetto. And with that, I want to give the floor to Dr. Wiatr.
The topic of my presentation is about legacy, Łódź Ghetto legacy at the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. Shortly speaking, I would like to try to answer the question, how come these materials became a part of the Jewish Historical Institute collection? Where did they came from? When and why? And why not all is in Łódź? Some part is in Łódź, some part is in Warsaw. For the purpose of today's meeting, I made a small, let's say, few groups of the materials which are in the Jewish Historical Institute according to their types. First, very important one is the documentation of Łódź origin, which is a part of Ringelblum Archive. I don't think I need to explain you what is in Ringelblum Archive, but in these papers, there were parts related directly to Łódź, not only to Łódź Ghetto, but to Łódź. Then we have a very huge collection holding 205, where is a lot of documentation, also connected not only to the ghetto time, but also to Łódź just after the outbreak of war, of the Second World War. Then we have a lot of very important artifacts, album, paintings, photographs, money, items. Among them, for example, the design of the stamp, which I choose as an item on the poster for this meeting. They are in a different collections, so you can find them in the iconography parts, in albums parts. Fortunately, most of them are already online, and we are lucky enough to have a very easy access to them. A very huge collection of literary works like poems, satirical poems, or some small literary texts are in the collection of with number 358. Some of them are already typed after the war, typed on the, so it's not only manuscripts, but are also afterward typescripts. Then we have two very well known for each researcher's holdings, 301 with diaries and memoirs, and 301. In these 301 holding, I found and counted 15 pieces from the Łódź Ghetto time, so diaries from Łódź Ghetto times. Some of them are already published, like Dawid Sierakowiak mentioned by Madin. Many are still only in the manuscript version, so still waits for my free time or for other researchers ready to publish them. 12, it's very tricky. I don't know exactly what was the decision taken when this holding were created, because they are not only diaries, but also memoirs. So someone just after the war write memoirs, and these pieces are also included in this holding. So 12 was written after the war. Some of them, among these memoirs, are also a part of another holdings, 301, which is the holding with testimonies. As you can see, it's more or less 170 testimonies given by survivors of Łódź Ghetto. Of course, the most important will be this part in Ringelblum Archive for many reasons, because Ringelblum Archive is very crucial itself for the historians. So what we have here, we have testimonies of people who fled from Łódź just after the war. Important for researchers because they show how was those first days after the invasion, and it was absolutely not a good time for Jews. They were punished in many ways. They couldn't go to the synagogue. They need to wear yellow stars and many other not pleasant decisions taken by German authorities. There are also a part with documents taken during the war, and we still don't know by whom. Maybe by Rumkowski. He was visiting, and Rumkowski was the head of the Judenrat, let's say shortly, in Łódź Ghetto. And he was visiting Warsaw a few times. He wanted to impress his Warsaw colleagues. So maybe he took some of the documents, like, for example, announcements which were very important for people in Łódź Ghetto to know what's going on. There was no communication other than announcements, announcing how many food there will be in the next 10 days. There are also postcards and letters. They could be taken to Warsaw by David Gertler. That's the very not black and white person, let's say. David Gertler was a German agent with the permission to visit many places in general government and also in around Łódź. And he was visiting Warsaw many times, taking papers, letters from Łódź inhabitants to Warsaw Ghetto and back, having some money for it, of course. However, I think that one of the postcards which you can see in this Ringelblum Archive, in this Łódź section, definitely could be given to the Oneg Shabbat group by a person who received it in Częstochowa. And the postcard was quite important because it was written by a famous poet, Miriam Ulinover, Yiddish woman poet, living in Łódź Ghetto, to her cousin in Częstochowa, but this postcard is included in this Ringelblum archive. We have also satirical poetry, pamphlets circulated in the ghetto. The last document we can see on it, it's April-May 1942. No longer, because of course there was no Ringelblum archive after the liquidation of Warsaw Ghetto. Fortunately for everyone reading in English, this volume has been already published in English. This is very fresh publication. A few weeks ago or a few days ago, there was even the presentation in Jewish Historical Institute about this 7th volume, where you can see the documents from annexed territories and also from Łódź. The other group of materials in Warsaw, in the Jewish Historical Institute, directly connected with Łódź, is record group 205, which is the collection of materials on the history of Jews in Łódź. As you can see, more than 600 files, 6.5 meters, all kind of documents you can imagine, issued by German or Jewish administration, correspondence, records, school materials, announcement, many absolutely unique materials produced in the ghetto archive, like encyclopedia, chronicle, reports, monograph essays, personal documents. What is quite interesting, talking about this record group 205, that this group is still enlarging. The last information about the new items included in this record was about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I think that Mrs. Bergman, I saw her among the visitors today, among the listeners, could tell us about the newspaper. You can see the picture of these newspapers on the right side. It's Nasza Gazetka. This newspaper was written in the orphanage in the Colonia, summer camp for children. It's a very huge book with text written by school children. I am showing it because when finding these materials online, sometimes people cannot get directly to the place, and this picture is used as the first icon on the record group 205. So being on the website, you must look for this Nasza Gazetka, and then you can go inside these materials. What is for historians absolutely helpful, these scans are in colorful version, so you can see how it looks in reality. It's much better than microfilms, which I used to work in Warsaw. So we are now, after this short, let's say, introduction, I am going to tell you about so-called Rumkowski archive and the turbulent fate of this archive. But unfortunately, as a historian, the old-fashioned historian who loves to work in papers, I need to give you some historical background. On January 19th, 1945, Łódź was liberated. Very soon, there arrived people from Lublin, so maybe that's also the connection in our meeting today. So we are both from these two cities, Lublin and Łódź. So people from Lublin, members of Jewish Historical Commission, started their activity in Łódź. Łódź was the biggest Jewish city center at that moment, and it was also the seat of many institutions, not only Jewish, but also the headquarters of many institutions, because Łódź wasn't destroyed and Warsaw was completely destroyed. So this Jewish Historical Commission started collecting documents in the buildings of former ghetto. Inhabitants of this city delivered the materials. And also there was a person named Nachman Zonabend, I will tell you about him in a moment, who turned over the rescued documents to this commission. Also, there's a quite well-known information about the revealing of the ghetto archive in one place, and I will also tell you about it a little bit later. Nachman Zonabend worked in the ghetto as a mailman. He wasn't deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau in August 1944. He stayed in Łódź and was a member of the cleaning commando. The text you can read now on the screen comes from the introduction to the inventory in YIVO in New York. So he's describing how he saved the Łódź Ghetto archive, taking one part at Dworska Street. Dworska was the place where many very important offices of the Jewish administration of the ghetto was seated. So he made one hide place for these materials. As you can see, he kept the photographs, drawings, paintings made by ghetto artists. I'm underlining photographs because I saw among the visitors today also the cousin of Mendel Grossman. So photographs of Mendel Grossman put in a book, in the albums, the small so-called glue sticks were also among these materials. Another part of his hidden materials was taken from the Plac Kościelny Square. This place were very well known to Nachman Zonabend because this is also the place of the ghetto post office of Judenpost operating in the ghetto, and also the place of the Łódź Ghetto archive, where all this important for me, because it was my work for last almost 16 years, my last professional career editing these materials which were produced in this archive. I mean the Chronic, the Encyclopedia, and many others. So he, just after Łódź was liberated and the Jewish Historical Commission was organized in Łódź, he decided to give some of these materials to the Jewish Historical Institute, commission. He's not mentioning in this testimony the fact that he was also employed by this historical commission as a photographer, and was also, for example, was in the group visiting the Spandau Institute in Gdańsk and taking the picture of the dead body. In 1947, he decided to left Poland and settled in Sweden, taking a lot of materials with him, then giving as a piece of reliquia, as a very saint papers to different institutions. So now we can see Nachman Sonnabend collection in Iwo, and also Nachman Sonnabend collection in Yad Vashem. Careful researcher can see on some papers, especially in Jewish Historical Institute, notes, I received it from Nachman Sonnabend. Careful researcher also can read about the not pleasant situation for Sonnabend, because he was accused for being a member of Jewish police, which was not true, and also that he sold this material for money, that he didn't give it, but he was paid. He was paid. But this is not a topic of today's discussion. What we have next, the revealing of the Łódź Ghetto archive in Łódź, very unique picture which I found on the website of Yad Vashem. You can see papers or documents or albums here. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a list what was there. There was, however, the information in the Jewish newspaper that this material was uncovered, and among others was the cards of encyclopedia. Jewish Historical Commission in Łódź started to organize this material. Unfortunately, the people wasn't very professional as a oh, gee, no, it's 1 minute left. So I must talk quickly, sorry. So they made a lot of mess trying to organize these materials. But what is important, you can see on the pictures, working commission in Łódź. See on the wall, you can see the plan of the ghetto. On the other side, on the other picture, you can see the signs of Jewish police from the ghetto. So being in Łódź, the commission was working was overwhelmed with papers from the Łódź ghetto. In 1947, Jewish Historical Commission moved to Warsaw. And with it, the whole Rumkowski archive is also taken to Warsaw. I can see those bunch of trucks taking all these papers to Warsaw. However, already in 1947, the director of the Łódź archive, the state archive, discussed with the city authority, the danger of taking the collection to Warsaw, which is supposed to be in Łódź. So officially, the collection was given as a deposit to the commission. And in March, where the position of Jewish Historical Institute, which was transformed from the Jewish Historical Commission, the status was not very strong. You must remember about the anti-Semitic campaign. So the government decided to give the order to take those papers back to Łódź. And between June 1968 and February 1969, the Rumkowski archive went back to Łódź, you can see on the cover page here, on the pictures, different signs. It's the Rumkowski with the number, then the Żich information, the Żich was Rumkowski, then the Łódź signs. All these documents, I mean not all, because some of the copy was left in Warsaw, let's say not officially, but it still is. It's the record group 205. But most of that Rumkowski archive was taken back to Łódź. It's more than 1,200,000 scans already available on Szukaj w archiwach.pl. If you can give me 2 minutes, I'm sorry, 2 more minutes, okay? Because I would like to show you some two personal stories connected with these documents. That's a piece of the album, Hut album, Hutniczy. I'm still using the German name Hutabteilung, which together with Maurice Friedman, the daughter of David, we are looking for it. She was looking for it for years. We knew it only in the black and white version, which was taken during the war, and which the picture of it was in the State Archive in Łódź. We couldn't find it for years, and accidentally it was in Jewish Historical Institute. So for Maurice already gave a lecture on it, very interesting. And the second information, which is also I'm very pleased to tell you that the cooperation between Jewish Historical Institute and Łódź itself is still very good. What you can see here, it's an artifact, is a model of the ghetto, which was done in the ghetto during the ghetto time. It is a part of the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw collection, but borrowed by the Radegast station in Łódź. It's quite good solution, because in Warsaw there is a lot of different beautiful things which are more related to Warsaw, and people going to Warsaw would like to see things related to Warsaw, not exactly to Łódź. And this model, which was just borrowed and is an exposition in Radegast station, ideally is corresponding to the model which is done in this Radegast station, because Radegast station prepared a model of the ghetto. You can see each house. This is from the date of May 1942. Each house, each street, even the cars, even trees has been reconstructed. You can see it in the building of Radegast, so this is the Lodz Umschlagplatz. And people visiting Łódź, visiting this place and seeing this model could also look on the model showing deportation from the war period. I'm sorry, but I'm very talkative all the time. So next time, please give me floor for Łódź topic altogether only, okay? Thank you very much. I'm looking forward for questions, if I be able to answer. I know there is no stupid question, only stupid answers, so I can face it.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and it's okay that you took a few more minutes. And yes, we will do a program specifically about Łódź. We already did with Miriam Friedman, who is in the audience today. So I'm very happy that she could be here to see, once again, her father's works being displayed on Talking Memory. And with that, I want to move on to our second speaker today. And I just have to get my notes ready because I was so enthralled by everything that I didn't get prepared ahead of time. for our next speaker, so I apologize for that. One moment, probably hear me clicking and everything. Here we go. So we're moving on to our second guest, Peter Nazaruk, and he is a researcher, educator, curator, and Yiddish translator at the Łódź Gate NN Theater Center in Lublin, Poland, where he has worked since 2015. In his work, Peter focuses on the perception of space in relation to language and identity, and the development of diversity of Jewish identities and their expression in cultural, political, and social life in the 19th and 20th centuries. Peter is a prolific penman, frequently publishing on the website of the Łódź Gate NN Theater, which I recommend going to visit, and in journals dedicated to the history of Jews. He is also the author of a collection of essays titled, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Coco Bebe, in Lublin 2019. You can correct me afterwards. Co-editor of the journal Escriptois and co-editor of the newly published Glass Plates of Lublin, Phoned Photographs of a Lost Jewish World, Amherst 2022. In 2017 and 2018, Peter received the Ewa Institute for Jewish Research Scholarship to attend the Uriel Weinrich and Bard College summer program in Yiddish language, literature, and culture in New York City. And I am honored to have you here today. I've wanted to bring someone from Łódź Gate, and Peter, I think you're our amazing choice for today's program. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martine. Thank you so much for your introduction. Thank you to all of our guests today in the audience. And well, before I'll start, I would like to firstly express my my warmest congratulations and deepest congratulations to the Historical Institute from me and from the Łódź Gate Center due to the 75th anniversary. I can only wish you next 75 years of work. However, being from Lublin, I have to, I can't omit one thing, and I have to mention one thing that Ewa mentioned. The fact is that the first fundament, the first basis of the Jewish Historical Institute was actually established in Lublin in the late of 1944. The institution mentioned by Ewa, called the Jewish Historical Commission, was established in Lublin, moved to Łódź and then to Warsaw, and in 1947 changed into the Jewish Historical Institute. So, you know, although technically the Jewish Historical Institute was established indeed in 1947, its history is a bit longer and also has strong Lublin roots. And of course, the topic of my today's presentation will be the library of Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin, or Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin. Behind me, you can see a beautiful, splendid photograph of the reading room of the yeshiva. But before I'll start my presentation, I would like to say just a few words about my institution, about the place where I work, which is the Łódź Gate Center. As you can hear, an institution with actually quite a long and quite complex name, but actually our name reflects our history and development quite well. We were established in the early 1990s, 30 years ago actually, as an avant theater, and we functioned as a theater for a couple of years. However, in time, our activity has changed and developed into something something much bigger, in my opinion. And one of the biggest turning points in our was the discovery of the significance of Grodzka Gate, or City Gate in Old Polish, which is our building. And you can see this building. The photograph on the left is from the interwar period. The photo on the right side, photo of this gate. It's actually the oldest building in Lublin. It's a it's a medieval gate that was obviously rebuilt many times throughout its history. But what is most significant about it is the fact that for centuries it was actually a border between Christian-dominated old town, old city of Lublin, and Jewish-dominated area beneath the castle in Lublin called Podzamcze, which basically means an area beneath the castle. So for centuries, second half of the 19th century, it was, well, on the one hand, a border between the two communities, but also, well, it depends on your view, but also it can be seen as a bridge between those two distinctively different, well, slightly different communities, Jewish and Christian community of Lublin. So I can only invite you to Lublin to visit us. Our activity is quite vast. We are a municipal Lublin city-owned institute dedicated to the preservation of Lublin's heritage, Jewish heritage included. Inside Grodzka Gate, you will find, archivists say, meters, and you will actually find meters of documents on the life and the destruction the Jewish community of Lublin. You will find lots of data about individuals, about buildings, and much, much more. So I can only invite you to visit Lublin. But main topic is not Grodzka Gate, but Lublin, Chachmei Lublin Yeshiva. Those of you who don't know much about Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, it was a yeshiva, obviously, built because of this grand dream of Rabbi Meir Shapira, who was previously he was a rabbi of Piotrków, not very far away from Łódź again, also Gliniany, but he wanted to build the best, the biggest, and the most modern yeshiva in Lublin, because of Lublin old Talmudic, because of the history of Talmudic thought in Lublin, and the yeshiva he was meant to be not only like the grandest yeshiva, providing the best education for boys who wanted to study there, but also providing things, decent shelter, decent living conditions, which was not very common in the interwar period. Like most yeshiva students used to, sleep in some, shops, eat not well, etc. So that was, it was something very painful for Shapira. Actually, in building this yeshiva, thanks to donations made by people from all over Poland, but also from other countries, mainly from the United States. This building, which is huge, it still stands in. It houses the Jewish community of Lublin. Is it dominates the area. The cost of the building was, of course, immense. It was huge, but he succeeded, and the yeshiva was opened in a grand ceremony in 1930, so years before the outbreak of the Second World War. And of course, such a yeshiva, like the grandest yeshiva in the world, needed the grandest library, the best Talmudic religious library, at least in Poland. But well, it often, when something was the best in Poland regarding the Jewish life, it meant also the best in the world. And the library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin was created in the same fashion as the building. people from all over Poland and abroad in books, old Hebrew, in most cases, old Hebrew books to the yeshiva, donating them. In many places, actually, I remember reading about boys from Łódź, Orthodox boys from Łódź who established some kind of like a committee, and they wanted to gather like 10,000 books in a month and send it to Lublin. I'm not sure whether they succeeded, but the fact is that before the outbreak of the Second World War, the yeshiva had at least like 20,000 volumes, most probably much more. And the problem is that what happened with this vast collection of books gathered from all over. If you're interested in like the history of yeshiva in Lublin, you will for sure find a story about the burning of its vast library. It's a story like it's quoted not only by sources like Wikipedia, but also serious researchers. And it is probably so widespread because it makes sense. Like we all knew what the Nazis, the Germans were doing with Jewish and non-Jewish books, artifacts during the war. Some of you might have seen in the National Library of Poland, they have like this glass vessel with ashes of books destroyed during the Warsaw Uprising. So like when someone tells you that the library of Lublin was destroyed during the war by the Germans, like you most probably accept it without putting any special thought in it, because as I said, it makes sense. The problem is though that there are no proofs that this burning happened. It is based on alleged note published in 1940 by a newspaper called Die Deutsche Jugendzeitung, which means German youth newspaper, which in fact means nothing. It can mean any German newspaper for the youth. And the problem is that many researchers were trying to find this newspaper. However, from what I know, I also was trying to find it. No one succeeded. The only source of this quote is probably a newspaper called Hatzofe that was printed in the British Palestine in 1941. They quoted this ghostly Deutsche Jugendzeitung, but a year after the alleged burning of the books from Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. There are no photographs proving that this fire happened. Surely the Nazis lots of photographs for propaganda reasons during such an event. There are no witness accounts. The only thing we have are artistic renderings of this fire. On the left, you can see a fragment, and you can find it was created after the war. It's a detail from a certificate issued by Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin in Detroit, because such a thing existed. It was established by the original Lublin Yeshiva the war. And on the right, you can see it's a detail from an ex libris of a person whose name was Yakov Tzvi Yoskowicz. I don't know anything about the person. However, it also shows the destruction of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin library, and you can see actually that it quotes a different German newspaper called Frankfurter Zeitung, I think, which was also never located. Also, because according to this legend, this story, the library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin was burned in 1940, which doesn't make sense for another reason. And the reason is that in 1941, the same Germans hired Rabbi Aaron Lebwohl, who was before the war, he was a student of the Lublin Yeshiva, and they hired him to catalog the library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. They confiscated it, put in huge wooden crates, most probably, and transferred to present-day voivodeship, provincial Lublin library named after Łopaciński. During the war, it was a German state library. And it seems, and there are documents proving the library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin was actually liberated together with Lublin in June of 1944. The Germans probably wanted to transport it either to Germany or some other place. However, because of the Soviet advances, they just left without the library. And here I have a few documents clearly stating that that the library was saved. The white one is actually from 1947 from the Jewish press agency. However, on the right, you can see a page from the very first post-war Jewish newspaper in Poland, which was called the Bulletin of the Jewish Press Agency in Lublin. And in this issue, it's from November 23rd. It's in Polish, but I will, of course, translate it. We can read. An organized effort to collect and sort out Jewish books has begun. About 80,000 volumes have been collected so far. The Ministry of Education has taken charge of all the rescued volumes, among which is also the library of Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin. Like they explicitly say that the library of the Lublin Yeshiva is is under the protection of the government. In the middle, you can script of a Yiddish radio broadcast. It's from, I think it's from January 1945. A Yiddish language radio existed in Lublin and then in Warsaw for a few years. And it says exactly the same, but in Yiddish. And finally, the document on the right is very interesting. It's a report of the activities of the so-called Culture and Propaganda Department of the Voivodeship Jewish Committee from the year 1940. And they say, with the beginning of the year 1946, normal work began in our department. One of the first tasks was to create a library that would satisfy the hunger for the Jewish population of Lublin. The Łopaciński Library, so today Voivodeship Library, during the war, State German Library, the Łopaciński Library in Lublin aided us greatly and donated Jewish books to us. This also included 1,000 Judaic books from Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin, which were rescued and stored in the Łopaciński library. These books, they write, were sent to Warsaw. And many researchers have suspected that the library was to Warsaw. There were also very similar testimonies known to researchers. However, like no one was able to find out the Warsaw period fate of this library. It made sense at some point when I was actually doing some very routine research in the holdings of the digital library of the Jewish Historical Institute. And to my surprise, I located a few books with very clear stamps of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. And, you know, during quite laborious research, I was able to locate 130 volumes, such volumes in the holdings of the Jewish Historical Institute with such stamps. Here you can see various designs. They had a few designs of such stamps. They usually say Library of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, Lubartowska 57 is the address of the yeshiva. And like I was like, it suddenly it made sense. The books, Jewish Historical Commission, which in time was changed, as both Ewa and me discussed, into the Jewish Historical Institute. So that's why this collection is available there. It's hard to tell how much more yet Lublin Yeshiva books are in the holdings of the Jewish Historical Institute, because like this research was based only on the holdings that were digitized. However, like we know that the entire collection is for sure not in the Jewish Institute. Actually, in 1947, a representative of the Hebrew University came to Poland, and well, also probably they visited other countries in Europe, and working together with local governments and institutions, they gathered as many as, I think, 200,000 Jewish books, and they transferred them to Israel. And that's why on many books in the National Library of Israel, you can find such stamps saying that this is a from Central Jewish Library, Central Jewish Committee in Poland, etc., etc. And also in the holdings of the National Library of Israel, you can find books with Lublin Yeshiva stamps. During my research, it's a not like the most pleasant job you can imagine. Like such books are not tagged, are not cataloged, so you have to go book by book in search for such stamps. However, I was able to find I think 90 such books and manuscripts, which are especially interesting, of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin in the holdings of the National Library of Israel and other libraries or religious or yeshivas in Israel, but also in other places, like, for example, Chabad Lubavitch Library in New York. There is no way of bringing this collection to Lublin, to Poland. It was scattered around the world. So that's why at Warsaw Ghetto, we decided that we will reunite this library, this book collection digitally, and create a website thanks to which we will be able to catalog and show books that were part of Lublin Yeshiva Library, and in a way symbolically return them to the city of Lublin. And maybe I will. The best thing will be to show you how the website looks like. You can type Lublin Yeshiva Library in Google, and you will for sure find it. So we have my essays in both Polish and English, so it's accessible for non-Polish speakers as well, about the history of this library, how it functioned, etc., with lots of photographs, documents. So I strongly recommend you reading it. We have a section with beautiful photographs of the yeshiva, mainly from the opening ceremony of the yeshiva. They were found 12 years ago in the attic of a building in Lodz, completely different subject. And finally, we have this digital, the Yeshiva digital library section, where we put records of books with that were identified as books that were part of Lublin Yeshiva. We have this master index file, which is basically an Excel file with titles, in Polish transliteration. We have titles in original Hebrew, authors, years of publication, places of publication, data about printers, data about location, some other notes, and finally links to digital libraries. And for example, here we have a link to a book that is in the holdings of the Jewish Historical Institute. So we have a stamp of the yeshiva, and in this case we have the entire book scanned. Most of them, by the way, are 19th century books, like 18th century books, nothing very special. However, a few of them are, I think, from the first 16th century. So it's something. We have links also to the National Library of Israel. They usually work. Sometimes there are problems with them. So again, the entire book is lots of very interesting stamps and other details, and also the stamp of the of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. And well, we have lots of photographs, lots of books here cataloged that appear in antiquarian, which is it's interesting how they end up in auctions. However, we also catalog them. So here you can see the stamp of Chachmei Lublin Yeshiva. In most cases, we have just front pages in such instances. So for now, we have been able to catalog almost 500 volumes that used to be part of the Lublin. Tomorrow I'll add a few more because I received photographs of their title pages. So this library, this digital library, is growing and growing, yet still the biggest unified collection of Lublin Yeshiva books is in Poland, so in the holdings of the Jewish Historical Institute. And I'm not sure how much time I have. I'm not like tracing it, but the last thing I would like to comment on is a beautiful event we had in the late September this year on Shabbat Eve and Rosh Hashanah. Two Lublin Yeshiva books returned to Lublin. They were restituted by Freie Universität Berlin. They were identified in their holdings, and they decided to restitute them to rightful heirs, which is the Jewish community of Lublin. So here you can see Stefan Kummer from Freie Universität Berlin officially giving two books. I think one is Shulchan Shlomo, the second is Megale Amukot, both 19th century editions, giving them officially to the representatives of the Jewish community in Lublin. The interior is the Lublin Yeshiva, so the books returned exactly to the place where they were 80 years ago. And although it was a beautiful and heartbreaking event, the Jewish community of Lublin has expressed itself very clearly on various occasions that it will not like actively pursue such returns, it will not actively claim such books. It will accept them or them if someone will be willing to donate them. However, it acknowledges and accepts the fact that this library is scattered around the world. So today we have 7 books in Lublin of the original Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin library. 5 were discovered in Lublin in 2005, I think, or 2004. And this year, 2 additional ones returned to Lublin. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
And thank you, Peter. By the way, we do have a comment, the last comment, so it's easy to find. It says the title pages of Hebrew books are called a Shabbat, or the gateway page. I don't know if you knew that. I didn't know that. Appropriate for the Gospel Brahma. So here we go. There's something mystical and something that brings these things together. So again, I want to thank both of our speakers. Very interesting evening today. I think it just shows the scope of and the complexity of the Jewish Historical Institute and how important it is really to celebrate the 75 years, but also to see the evolution from the Central Jewish Historical Commission that was also set up in Lublin and in Lodz, but in the end became seated in the Jewish Historical Library of the Great Synagogue in Warsaw. There are a few questions right now for Peter. You're going to have to wait, but there is one question I think that we can have for both of you. And maybe I'll start with that question. Miriam Friedman, Moritz Friedman's daughter, is in the audience, like I said before, and she asked a very interesting question of Eva. She said, can you describe the most interesting or surprising discovery that you made? And I think that that can be a question for the both of you in your research.
Who will tell first? Shall I?
Sure.
Okay, so I will start. The most fascinating discovery. Well, considering the materials which are in the Jewish Historical Institute, because that's the main topic, I think that a small girl, Minia Cooper, was my hero, and well, she tired me, as a matter of fact. There is a diary, the number in this collection is number 9. It means the diary was just at the beginning included in the collection, and for years it was anonymous. It was even called for a moment Polish Anna Frank, of course. It was published partly, and then during the work on the anthology of the text from the ghetto, starting this work, we got 4 anonymous diaries, and ending the work, only 2 anonymous diaries left. The first one, which I discovered, was Abram Łaski. His diary is in Yad Vashem. That's the diary written on the margins of the book, of the French books, in 4 languages. Discovering that name took me about 10 minutes. And then I wanted to discover this little girl, and I've got many information about her. And it took me 1 year or even more to find out the name. It was really like a detective work, but unfortunately, all the time I was more like Dr. Watson, not Sherlock Holmes, and each attempt was a failure. I looked through thousands of materials because I knew that she was Minia or Estera. I knew her age. I knew her that she got sister, brother, where mother worked, where father worked. Many information, and they couldn't find her. Finally, I did. So fortunately, because it's a kind of reward in my work to give this poor little girl a name, so we could know, we could call her. Maybe that's craziness, and I'm always thinking whether I am a good historian or rather emotional person than a historian, and historian should be more like pathomorphologist working on dead bodies. but it's a reward for me, a reward that I could name her. It's like a small statue for her. That's my biggest recovery connected with the Jewish Historical Institute. However, when I was yesterday going through the catalog of this 302 holdings, she's still unknown there. So I must write a letter to give her a name at least.
Monica is here, so you can definitely, she hears you. Wonderful. And by the way, I think that it's so important if you can give a name. One of the things that we know is that people were turned into numbers and lists. And so giving back a name, giving a picture, giving a description, all these different tangible pieces of evidence help us to understand the personal stories. I think is exactly what historians should be doing. So I'm fine with that, Eva. Keep going in that direction. And Peter, do you have a...
Well, first of all, maybe I have to say that I'm not so much actually interested in the history of religious thought. Like I'm doing most of my research, like circles around secular developments mainly in pre-war Lublin, but maybe today I'll focus on the yeshiva library. I'm not a Hebrew speaker. Like I understand only a bit from what I understand from Yiddish. Right. So in most cases, I don't like pay much attention to the content of the books that were a part of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin library. But one, let's call it discovery, was quite curious. Like recently, I cataloged a forged Jerusalem Talmud. It's a famous story. Like maybe you know this story. Like I think it was in like 1907 maybe. There was this printer in Hungary. I claimed that he discovered somewhere in Turkey missing parts of the Jerusalem Talmud, and they were printed and distributed among Jewish communities in Europe. And well, it seems that the Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin also had such a forged Jerusalem Talmud. So it was quite funny actually.
If I can add something about this discovering and pleasure of being a researcher, it is also the album of the Abteilung, which was done by Maurice's father, because we knew that it is somewhere. Because I just find in the internet the colorful picture of it. But it was a really very detailed investigation, and just by accident, by talking with the GIH employee, we heard both of us, oh, this is in our library, so just go and see it. So sometimes we need only a moment to solve such a mystery.
Well, Eva, first of all, people are asking for the name of the girl again. They missed
it. It's Minia
write
Cooper.
that in the chat box.
Minla Cooper. I am putting the name here, Minla Cooper.
Yeah, and I think, Pietro, what you're talking about, just understanding the digital side of being able to put together a library when you know it's scattered. I think Moritz Rudin's daughter can be a witness to this, that all of her father's works are scattered all over. I think Elizabeth Reidnick also was on our program, the same situation of, artworks being scattered and sometimes purposely scattered. 400 pieces of art were separated all over. And I think that maybe in some way this scattering, like what I showed when we started the program, this report that was smuggled out and sent to Warsaw, is just another testament that people were trying to get as much evidence out there and get it scattered all over the place so that it would maybe somewhere in one of the places it would be saved and protected. I'm trying to see if there is another question, mostly about the story about the young girl now. let me see if there's anything. There was a question that I didn't quite understand. Someone was asking about the children's writings at the beginning. If do you talk about children's writings? Is that the little book on the side? Somebody wanted to know the source of that, but I'm not quite sure what they were talking about. And one of the program with Eleanor Bergman was about that, but I don't remember this today. Do you know what she's talking about? Can you please post the link to the collection that includes the children's writing you displayed?
Okay. So maybe next question I will try to do it. This is
okay. And there's one other question again. It's about Łódź. How much does this material overlap or not with the material in the Lodz Ghetto collection in the Polish State Archives? So that's another question that someone is asking.
Sorry, can you just repeat it, because I was looking for.
You were looking. How much does this material that you talked about today overlap with the material in the Lodz Ghetto collection in the Polish State Archives?
In the Polish, well, the Polish State Archive is a huge, enormous collection. It's more than 1,200,000 scans. Yeah. And the Żich collection is like a small, however, it's, well, many of the documents are the same, because in the ghetto time, they were copied everything. Yeah, so instead of one copy, they made 4 copies, and now I can see the same copy in Warsaw, New York, Jerusalem, and Łódź. However, some parts are missing from the Łódź collection and are in Warsaw collection. So now, for example, we are now preparing a new publication of Oskar Zinger's reportages. So I made a kind of resume, finding missing parts in Ghetto Fighter's house, for example. I don't know how, let's say. Half of page of completely new in Jewish Historical Institute, and not full set in Łódź. So it's a huge mess, unfortunately. And I must say that what is important in the Warsaw collection, so these artifacts, these paintings, these albums, they are really very interesting, and not many of them can be seen in Łódź. And unfortunately, many of them, as Piotr also mentioned about the books, which are spread all over the world. So the materials from Jewish Historical Institute in early 60s or early 50s just disappear. We still have some information, for example, about the film made by Nazis in the ghetto, which was donated to Jewish Historical Institute, and there is no sign of it. So the question whether this film is somewhere in the box under the table, like Encyclopedia was for years, or time destroy it because it's very delicate material, or it is somewhere in the world, in some private collection or whatever. So I'm listening to Piotr's presentation, I was jealous in my mind because you are able to make this virtual library. In terms of the ghetto papers, the Łódź ghetto papers, it's probably impossible because it's the hugest collection ever you can imagine. You cannot imagine how huge collection it is. I think it's just generation of historians wouldn't be able to research all of it.
There is a question for you, Piotr, about you said that you don't really go into the content of the books, but somebody was asking about the books that were from earlier centuries. What were these books and what was the subject matter that they referred to? By the way, you say you work more on the secular side. Were there also secular books in the yeshiva, or were they all
no,
religious?
All of them were religious books.
Yeah.
There were some books in Yiddish, not like they were rather rare in in that library. However, most of them were Hebrew, and all of them were religious books meant for students. And actually, I think I can show you the books from earlier centuries. So the oldest one is from 1548, printed in Venice. It's actually a part of the Babylonian Talmud.
Putting on my glasses for that. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, but as I said, most of them are 19th, 18th century editions. So they are not actually, they are not very valuable per se. Like they are valuable because they have stamps of Lublin Yeshiva or stamps of Meir Shapira, because he also had his private library that was later included into the library of Yeshivas Lublin. But they are not valuable in most cases because of their age or anything like that.
Okay, and I see that there's some links coming up. Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Eva, for putting up links. Peter, you're also invited to put up a link for the Ringelblum Gate as well. And by the way, some people did write about visiting there. So, like me, it really was an amazing experience, and it really has expanded. I was there in 2008, I think, so a lot has happened since I was there, so I definitely need to go back. So with that, I want to once again thank my speakers today, Ewa Wiatr and Peter Nazaruk. Really, I think the best way to close this three-part series is to bring in the groundbreaking research that's being done, talking about 21st century research, Warsaw Gate doing digital work, which is so important. How do you literally gather up the tangible evidence when it's scattered literally all over the world, and also to work with the actual pieces of paper wherever they are, and to make sure that they are discovered and given a name and a place. And lastly, I want to once again, I think, Peter, you started your presentation with that, to remind everyone that this series was created in order to mark the 75th anniversary of the Jewish Historical Institute, that was directly created from the Central Jewish Historical Commission, and for the past 75 years has been a major component in research about the life of the Jewish community in Poland in general, and more specifically in Warsaw. I think that the director, Monika Kranchik, said this in her opening remarks in the first program, that the goal of the center, the institute, was to be a research center, as we see today, but also a museum, an archive, and a library. And it is totally integrated into Polish life in Warsaw, as far as the archive, bringing the Jewish perspective, the remembrance, education, the communal initiatives that Monica talked about, digitalization that she put the link in right now, and of course, being a family heritage center for those families that are looking for their roots. And not only that, but also having a place for other communities in Poland, that information about them was also archived and protected and preserved there. And I want to thank our audience, because so many people in our audience over the three programs told us about their personal experiences, either visiting Zich or their family connections. Today, many people wrote about Łódź. I hope you saw how many people are writing about their specific families. And just being able to see the outreach of this institution and how it lasted over the 75 years with all the changes and still changes that are going on in Poland even today. And we will be back next year in January. And we have 3 programs in January, and you will get information about all 3 in emails, in an upcoming email. So with that, I want to say shalom to everyone, to our guests, and the director of the Jewish Historical Institute that is with us today, Monika Kandrich, and also a special thank you to Julia Saban from the Polish Institute in Tel Aviv that helped me to bring this program together with her amazing ideas and suggestions for speakers. Shalom.
Shalom, thank you so much. Good night.